Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to go over the safety of the plants themselves, if you don't mind, and this will be for Dr. Small. You mentioned that you had been developing many of the cannabis plants, et cetera. Now, years ago, the marijuana that you would buy on the streets was nowhere near, I'm told, nowhere near the strength that it is today. And I'm wondering, with the home grow operations, I mean, do you have to have a special seed to grow those extra strong plants, or is it the method of extraction? And how freely, what it comes down to is then you have a whole bunch of plants that are producing very strong, a very strong drug. And I worry that this will not protect Canadians. There are no quality controls over what's being grown in the homes. And should that be distributed outside the homes or even to the people in the homes? So I'm just wondering about how you safely grow plants, and should that be something the government should get into teaching people, because they're saying, go ahead, it's all fine.
You've asked a very broad question, and I know I'm required to answer briefly. I find it a little difficult to accept that at this time the government of Canada is going to issue a manual on how to grow cannabis for the average consumer, although, you know, maybe it isn't the worst idea in the world. I do think there are legitimate concerns, safety concerns, for growing cannabis indoors that relate to the question of mold production, and also the way that illicit cannabis is grown sometimes is rather unhealthy. I'll just leave it at that. In terms of strength, it is true that modern strains produce larger concentrations, larger amounts. It is also true that people have learned, and this is the case commercially, how to trim off the weaker parts so that the final product is quite concentrated, kind of like producing rye whiskey as opposed to beer. I also share, however, Dr. Page's basic philosophy that it's nice to allow people to grow plants, and excuse me for saying so, even though this is not your typical plant, it does provide an opportunity for many people to become amateur horticulturists, and it, in my opinion, can be done in a safe fashion. It also can be done in an unsafe fashion, as I think has been pointed out by several parties here. And from my point of perspective, I really can't predict what the present legislation would do in terms of safety considerations. To me, it's a bit of a gamble.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've still got more time.
Thank you. I really want to get down to, though, what I perceive as a danger, an unforeseen danger perhaps, that people growing the plants in their homes will be producing varieties, and you can't help it. You just want to make it better, and you're cultivating the best, and you're growing the best. It's like people who do their own wine at home or their own beer. And I'm just going to be worried about how you manage to keep people safe with this kind of, and I think I am speculating, you're right, but you've managed in your development to keep people safe. You recommended the strains and the dosages for the medical marijuana. So how do you manage to keep, if people are growing their own, how do you manage to keep people safe?
Medical marijuana is produced with practices that are far more stringent than are possible by your home grower. For example, medical marijuana is commonly irradiated to remove microbiological contamination, safety issues. Commercial medical marijuana, and indeed this will be the case for recreational marijuana, is produced with careful attention to humidity so that mold possibilities are kept low. Also, you can control fertilizer. Even if you use pesticide, you can control your chemical inputs. That being said, for recreational marijuana, you're not necessarily talking about a population that is immune compromised and is much more susceptible. So one can, I think, only examine the general situation in Colorado, Washington, elsewhere, and as people are doing, and draw your own conclusions about the level of safety involved. I don't think there's a clear evaluation available at this time.
Thank you.
I have to move on. We've passed
Thank
that
you, Chair. Thank you
five-minute
very
segment.
much.